Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus A330 pilot, and welcome to the cockpit preparation tutorial in the Airbus A330 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The cockpit preparation is conducted after the preliminary cockpit preparation is completed and normally while the pilot monitoring is outside for the walkaround. The cockpit preparation follows a certain standard flow pattern, which really makes it easy to remember what to do and when to do it. So let's go ahead and have a look. In general, the flight deck is divided in several different sections, and we start our scan flow on the overhead panel going from the bottom left to the top left, then going from the bottom middle to the top middle, and then from the bottom right to the top right. From there we continue on the forward main panel, and in here we run the scan in the U form from the top left, down, right, and then back up to the top, until last but not least we are moving down onto the pedestal, where we go again top left to bottom left, top middle to bottom middle, top right to bottom right, and then finally into the FMS. Once the FMS preparation is completed, we are going to move up to our glare shield panel, set up the ethos and the FCU, and last but not least we go down to the lateral controls on the left side, move it up to the front and over to the right hand side. If you remember these flow patterns, then it will be pretty easy to remember all of the switches you need to press and to get some structure into your procedure. Now let's take a seat on the captain's seat, and we're going to start with the panel flow. So starting on the bottom left, we generally want to turn off all the white lights and observe that we only see those amber fault lights for the engine driven generator and no others. The only white lights that can remain are located on the maintenance panel on the top over here. Alright, so starting on the bottom left, we make sure the wipers are off, the emergency button is off and guarded, the manual mask release switch is guarded, and then we can turn the flight recorder ground control switch on, which starts the cockpit voice recorder. And on the right hand side we can turn the crew supply or the crew oxygen supply switch on. Make sure that all the GPWS switches are in auto. On the emergency elect panel, make sure the switches are guarded. On the evac panel, we make sure that the command switch is off and guarded, and the captain and purser switch is in the captain position, which enables only the captain to trigger the evacuation signal. Moving further up on the fuel panel, the inner tank split switches are off and guarded, the APU fire switch is in and guarded, the IRSs are in nav, and the cockpit door control switch is in the norm position. Now we can move up to the top of the panel, where the ELT is in the guarded position and the reset switches are all pushed in. Now moving back down to the middle, or to the center of the overhead panel, on the external lights panel we set the strobe switch into the auto position, beacon off, wing light off, nav and logo switch into the position number 1. Position 2 is only used if number 1 is inoperative, so number 1 is always the default position. The runway turn-off light is off, the landing lights are off, and the nose light is off. APU as needed, and then on the signs panel, once refueling is complete, we set the seatbelt sign on, no smoking switch auto, and the emergency exit lights armed. The internal lights are set as needed, and the annunciator lights are in bright during the day and in dim during the night. Moving further up, the anti-ice switches are off, and the probe window heat switch is in the auto position. The cabin pressurization panel sees the valve selector in the guarded middle position. The mode selector is auto, and the landing elevation switch is in the auto position, and the ditching switch is off and guarded. Now, do note that off means no light illuminated over here. On the air conditioning panel, the ram air switch is guarded and all the switches are pushed in. APU bleed as needed, cross bleed selector auto, and the mode selector is on norm, and the temperatures are around about in the 12 o'clock position. Moving up on the electrical panel, The IDGs are guarded, the generator fault light is illuminated if the engine generators are not running, which they can't since the engines are turned off. And apart from that, no white lights are illuminated. The battery selector switch should be in the forward position, so in the APU position. Moving further up to the fuel panel, we ensure that the fuel pumps are turned on, and we got to turn them on in a specific sequence. Basically, we want to avoid the standby pump from activating. The standby pump activates if either of the main pumps are not turned on and the standby pump switch is on. So in order to turn the pumps on, we turn on the main pumps first and then the standby pump second. And the same applies on the other hand side as well. If your aircraft is fitted with a center tank, make sure that the center tank fuel pumps are also in the auto position. The trim tank feed selector is in the guarded position and the outer tank transfer switch is off and guarded. Moving up to the hydraulic panel, basically all the switches are off and guarded and the red manual release button is in the guarded position. Next up we get to the engine fire panel. Now, we press and hold the test switch, and just like on the APU fire test, we ensure that the fire switches illuminate, the agent squib and discharge lights illuminate, we hear the continuous repetitive chime, and we would also verify the indications on the ECAM as well as the fire lights illuminating down here. Unfortunately, due to the simulator's limitation, I cannot look around while I'm running the test, so I can't show you that in action. Now, when the test is complete, release the test switch. The maintenance panel up here is up for maintenance, so we are not going to touch anything over here, but we can ensure that the reading light switches are both in the off position. Those control the reading lights for the jump seats. Now, continuing on the right hand side, the wiper once again is off. The engine manual start and N1 mode buttons are in the guarded and off positions. The ventilation switches are all auto. The cargo smoke panel sees the agents guarded. We do not need to run the test. And on the cargo air conditioning panel, we ensure that appropriate temperatures are selected. Now, if you fly an aircraft that has the system for the forward cargo compartment fitted, normally the norm position is selected. You can turn it off if not needed, but normally we just keep it in the norm position. The flight control panel has everything lights out, and moving up to the observer's audio control panel, we turn on the PA and turn the volume roundabout to the middle position. This is used in order to record any of the PAs that the cabin crew is doing on the voice recorder without actually playing the PAs in the cockpit, because let's admit it, we don't need to hear the millionth safety demonstration, right? Moving further to the top on the right hand side, we can run the voice recorder test, which is currently not simulated in the iniBuilds. You basically press and hold the button and then you ensure that you do get a good audio control light. The reset switches are all in the guarded position and the data loading selector is off. So from here we are done with the overhead, so let's move down to the center instrument panel. Now, on here we start on the top left with our QNH, and if we have a look into the current weather conditions, we can see that the current QNH is 1032, so let's go ahead and set that. So 1032 is selected. If an RMI is installed in your aircraft, be sure that you have set it up appropriately. So for us, we are going to use the VORs today, which is the standard setting if no NDB is tuned. On the left hand side, ensure that the north reference button is in an appropriate position, and do note that there are only very few airports in the world where the true position is used, so normally it's all on magnetic. The ECAM switchings are in the auto position, and going down to our clock, we press and hold the set button on the date so that we can check that the correct date is set. So today is the 30th of November 2024, and it is very important that the correct date is selected over here because a lot of the internal computers of the Airbus are running on this system. If an incorrect date is selected over here, then you may encounter all different kinds of issues, all the way to the flaps not responding to your commands. The German foreign minister greets you on that one. On the right hand side, we ensure that the clock mode is in GPS and that the elapsed timer is not running and the chronometer is not running. Moving over to the right hand side then, the landing gear gravity extension is in the guarded position and the anti-skid and nose wheel steering switch is on, and the accumulator pressure on the triple indicator is in the green band, or at least outside of the amber band. The brake fan is set as needed. Now let's move on to the pedestal. We start up here with our radios, which have already been set up, and the same goes for the audio control panel. Remember, we set these panels in the preliminary cockpit preparation. Now going further down, the weather radar is set to calibrated, off, weather and turbulence, off, and the tilt is set to something reasonable, such as normally somewhere around +5 is going to go rather well for the takeoff. Moving further down, the ground spoilers are in the retracted position and not armed. Remember, if they are armed, you can see that white part down here. We don't want them armed, so be sure that we don't see the white. The park and brake is set unless the brakes need to cool. Now, how do we know if the brakes need to cool? We can verify that on the wheels eCam page, and in general, as a good rule of thumb, you don't want to push with the brakes hotter than 200 degrees. So, let's go ahead and deselect that again and then move back into the middle. The rudder and trim indicator is in the middle position, and then we can already go up to the right. So our radio panels are once again set. The transponder panel is set to standby. The selector is on the side of the pilot flying. So today we are flying from the captain's seat, so the selector is on number 1. The altitude reporting button is set to on. TCAS set above and into standby. Last but not least, let's tune a sensible squawk. And in order to set a squawk, first of all we need to clear the present input. Now how do we do that? Pressing the clear button once removes the last entered digit. Pressing it again removes the entire squawk from the display. And now we can set a new squawk. Normally 2000 is the default IFR squawk, and be aware that you always need to enter all 4 digits. Now, this already concludes our cockpit preparation. From here on, we are going to move into the FMS setup, but that is going to be part of a dedicated video. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope that you learned something today. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below, and as always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.